three ways to charge a person with a crime. The first is the presentment to a grand jury. The second is an indictment from a grand jury. And the third is an information. Okay, those are three ways. Now, don't get yourself confused. There is a difference between a grand jury and a petit jury. Petit jury is what finds you guilty, right? That's the jury of your peers, and and they all stand up and unanimously say, yes, we find you guilty of blah, 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 right? But before the grand jury, the jury process is actually a two-part process that begins with what's called a grand jury. Now, the grand jury, its purpose is, first, it's 16 to 23 people that are not attorneys, they're not judges, they're not attached to any particular branch of government. It was a right that the people reserved to themselves to act as a neutral, unbiased decision maker in reviewing the state's case to make sure that the state is not exceeding the power or authority statutorily conferred upon them in their exercise of power. So the purpose of the grand jury was to review the state's case. Before anybody can be arrested and held to answer, they needed to review the case to make sure that that prosecutor was not exceeding the power authority statutorily conferred upon them or bringing arbitrary or capricious charges against someone, because we wanted to make sure that we had a neutral, unbiased arbiter, a third party that would review before any liberties are deprived of the people. And thus the Constitution of the United States of America, Clause 1 of Amendment 5, what it says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. So that's clear. You have to have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone and holding them over for a capital or an infamous crime. Capital crime is any crime punishable by a death. That's easy. An infamous crime is any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in a penitentiary. So if you can get more than 1 year, that is an infamous crime requiring the grand jury indictment prior to holding someone over for that offense. Now, again, the purpose of the grand jury was to be a check on prosecutorial and judicial power to ensure that innocence is not suffering. It's the one thing that our founders built into the system that would ensure that innocence does not suffer. And yet, I'm going to tell you that if you were to open up the criminal procedure manual right now, this is the United States Criminal Procedure Manual, written by a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, so a federal appellate judge. If you were to go down to the fourth paragraph of the preface, it says, most prosecutors across America agree that as much as 15% of people in prison are innocent. But that's an acceptable deviance because our system isn't perfect. I believe that number is much higher, but our system, a federal appellate judge says, oh, we all agree. Everybody knows that 15% of people in prison are innocent, but that's okay.
Yeah, nothing's being done. Yeah, nothing's being done about it. So that's why
my challenge to that judge, my challenge to every single one of these prosecutors is, before you call something imperfect, I would first challenge you to use it the way that it was designed to be used. Don't blame it for your incompetence. Don't blame it for your laziness, and certainly don't blame it if innocence is in prison suffering such as it is today. You're not following the rules that were intended to protect the innocent from hasty and malicious charges by the very person that is denying you the right to the benefit of that proceeding. It's a disgusting practice, what they're in today. Absolutely. But now, one more thing is that we need to understand that, again, the Constitution of the United States says you must have an indictment by a grand jury. It says it. It's written right in the Fifth Amendment that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. There are 13 states today, Steve, that do not conduct a grand jury at all, such as the state of Washington.
Really?
The state of Washington does not conduct a grand jury at all. Every single capital, every single infamous crime is charged by way of information, not by indictment, right? Because the state has decided that they don't have to do what the Constitution requires them to do. And it's not just Washington, also the state of Connecticut, the state of Pennsylvania, the state of Michigan, the state of North Dakota. These are states that are acting in direct willful defiance of the established procedures and processes codified in the Constitution of the United States for the adjudication of a crime. And that means that right now today, Steve, there's more than 700,000 people who are currently in prison here in America illegally and unconstitutionally on direct facial constitutional violations because these states did not follow the rules in the adjudication of those crimes. I want those brothers and sisters to be identified. I want them back home to their families. And if you have one innocent person locked up, That's too many, system. There is no acceptable deviance to your exercise of power, certainly not when you're not following the very basic rules and agreed upon code of conduct in the adjudication of crime. That's unacceptable. Now, if I could continue on, I want to mention what information is so that I can draw the illustration between the two.
Please do.
So an indictment, again, comes from a grand jury, 16 to 23 people that review the state's case and determine whether or not there is sufficient probable cause to assume that a crime has been committed. They either hand down a bill of indictment, which says, yes, we found that there's sufficient evidence to believe that a crime was committed. Now you can go and hold this person over for this offense. But if they come back and say, no, bill, what they're saying is, we didn't find that there was sufficient probable cause to assume that a crime has been committed. Thus, you may not arrest this individual for whatever alleged crime you, prosecutor, believe that they committed, right? It's the check on the prosecutorial power.
Right.
Now, I want to come back in a moment, but information was created by California, state of California, in their inferior constitution back in the late 1800s. What information is that an officer, police officer, prosecuting attorney, will receive information from someone that you committed a crime. That prosecutor will then reduce that information to writing in the form of an affidavit, and then he will submit it to a judge and ask that judge to determine whether or not there is sufficient probable cause to assume that a crime has been committed. And that judge will say, yep, this looks good to me. I'm going to issue a warrant to have this person arrested because I believe that there's sufficient probable cause to assume that a crime has been committed. What this does is it eliminates that neutral, unbiased third party decision maker. And it allows for only agents of the state to make a determination as to whether or not to charge you, whether or not to arrest you, whether or not to try you, and where is the neutral, unbiased decision maker when the system admits that 96% of all convictions come by way of a plea bargain, not even a jury trial. And now you have nothing but agents of the state that is determining whether or not, or what is or is not laws, what is or is not investigating what is or is not a law. They are bringing charges as to whether or not you did it. They are judging you as to whether or not you're guilty of it. And then they send you off to a state-run institution where they're going to benefit financially off of the forced involuntary servitude of you. Once you reach that institution, there is no one outside of the state's agents that's involved in this system, including your own defense attorney, because your defense attorney got paid and is licensed by the state.
That's right.
This is a disgusting, single-sided solution to a justice system that has no care or concern whatsoever for what is truth, what is factual, and what is right. And we've got to stop this in its tracks. And that's why my litigation is going directly after these agents of government that fail to understand the limitations of power that they have codified in the Constitution of the United States. And we're going to make them listen.